An uncontrollable desire. A story that no one should ever know. She betrayed me and didn't even hide it. She thought I would beg, make a scene, demand an explanation. But I just got up and left without saying a word. Now that her world has collapsed, she is standing in front of my door, begging for a second chance. But there is one problem. I am no longer the man she betrayed. The night it all changed, I wasn't expecting anything unusual. I came home like I always did, tired from work, ready to unwind. The house was quiet, too quiet, but I told myself she was probably asleep or watching something with her headphones in. I walked into the kitchen, saw her glass of wine on the counter, half empty, and then I heard her voice from the living room. Low, hushed, but unmistakably amused. That's when the first ripple of something uneasy crept up my spine. I stepped closer, careful with my movements, my heart pounding for reasons I didn't fully understand yet. Then I heard it, the laugh, soft and flirtatious, followed by words that weren't meant for me. I wish I was with you instead. The words hit like a punch to the gut. My feet felt cemented to the floor. The realization settled in fast and hard. She wasn't talking to a friend. She wasn't joking. The tone, the softness in her voice, it was the voice she used to have when we were first together. And she wasn't using it on me. I didn't make a sound. I could have stormed in, could have grabbed the phone, could have demanded answers. But I didn't. I stood there, listening as she giggled, as she whispered promises, as she betrayed me, without even knowing I was watching her do it. Something in me shifted at that moment. Maybe it was the months of feeling something was off, but ignoring it. Maybe it was the exhaustion of always being the one who cared more. Or maybe it was the brutal clarity that, at that exact moment, I meant nothing to her. Whatever it was, I knew one thing. I was done. I turned around, walked back to our bedroom, and grabbed a bag. Essentials only. Clothes, wallet, phone, keys. No wedding ring. No keepsakes. No reminders of what I thought we had. She didn't even notice as I packed. She was too caught up in her conversation, too engrossed in whoever was on the other end. I walked past the living room, one last glance at the woman I had spent years loving, and she never even looked up. That was the part that stayed with me the most. Not the betrayal itself, not the words she said, but the fact that I could walk out of our home, out of her life, and she wouldn't even notice until I was already gone. I didn't leave a note. I didn't slam the door. I didn't give her the fight she expected. I just left, and maybe that's what would haunt her the most. I drove through the night without a destination, the highway stretching endlessly before me, headlights cutting through the darkness. My phone buzzed a few times, but I ignored it. I knew who it was. I knew what she'd say, the excuses she'd make, the half-hearted apologies that wouldn't change a damn thing. I wasn't interested. Not anymore. I kept driving until exhaustion settled deep in my bones. When I finally stopped, it was in some nameless town, a rundown motel with flickering neon lights and a receptionist who barely looked up as I paid for a room. The door creaked when I pushed it open, the air stale and heavy, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered. I dropped my bag, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall, the silence pressing against me. The weight of it all should have crushed me, but instead I felt free. In the days that followed, I moved without direction. I ate when I was hungry, slept when exhaustion took over. I existed in a state of numbness, not quite feeling, not quite thinking. The world moved around me, but I wasn't part of it. Then, one morning, something shifted. I woke up and realized I was done being a ghost in my own life. I needed to rebuild. Not for her, not to prove anything, but for myself. I found a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I got a job at a local hardware store, something simple, something that didn't demand too much of me while I figured out my next move. At first, I kept to myself. People tried to be friendly, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure I ever would be. But time is a way of softening even the hardest edges, and little by little, I let them in. A coworker invited me for a drink after work. A neighbor knocked on my door with extra food, saying she made too much. I started going to the gym, focusing on something tangible, something that let me channel everything I didn't know how to process. And then, just as I started to believe I was putting it behind me, she found me. I came home one evening, groceries in hand, and there she was sitting on the steps of my building. She looked different, thinner, more fragile, as if regret had hollowed her out. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I made a mistake." I didn't respond, didn't move, just stood there, letting the words hang between us. "I miss you," she continued, her voice cracking. "I miss us." A year ago, those words would have shattered me. A year ago, I would have done anything to hear her say them. But now they meant nothing. "You miss what I gave you," I said finally, my voice calm, steady. "Not me. If things had worked out with him, you wouldn't be here." She flinched but didn't deny it. She knew the truth as well as I did. "Please," she whispered, stepping closer. "Just give me a chance to explain." I let out a slow breath, looking at the woman who had once meant everything to me and felt nothing. "No," I said simply, stepping past her, unlocking my door. "You made your choice. Now live with it." I walked inside and shut the door, leaving her outside with nothing but the weight of her own regret. I stood behind the door for a few moments after shutting it, listening for any sign that she was still there. A part of me expected her to knock, to plead, to try and push her way back into my life the same way she had pushed me out of hers when she thought she had something better waiting for her. But there was nothing, just silence. After a few minutes, I peeked through the blinds. She was still sitting on the steps, her head in her hands, shoulders shaking. I could have felt something then, pity, sadness, even the ghost of the love I used to have for her. But there was nothing, just a cold, quiet detachment. I walked away from the window, refusing to let her presence disrupt the peace I had spent so long rebuilding. I made myself dinner, turned on the TV, and pretended like she wasn't outside. I knew she'd leave eventually. She had no choice. By the time I checked again, she was gone. The next few days passed without incident, but a part of me knew it wasn't over. She had found me once, and she'd try again. I just didn't know when. Sure enough, a week later, she was waiting for me when I left work. She looked even worse than before, dark circles under her eyes, her once perfect posture slumped in defeat. I didn't stop walking, didn't even slow down. "Nick, please," she called after me, desperation thick in her voice. "Just talk to me. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking for." I kept my pace steady, barely sparing her a glance. "There's nothing to talk about. I need you to understand. I do understand." I cut her off, my voice colder than I intended. "I understand that you made a choice, and I understand that now you regret it. But that's not my problem anymore." She grabbed my arm, forcing me to stop. The touch was familiar, but it didn't stir anything in me. "Not like it used to." "I was wrong," she whispered, eyes searching mine for something that wasn't there anymore. "I was selfish. I was stupid. I thought. You thought the grass was greener," I finished for her. "But it wasn't, was it?" She shook her head, tears spilling over her cheeks. "I miss you. I miss us. I miss the way you loved me." "You don't miss me," I corrected. "You miss the security. You miss knowing there was someone who would always be there for you, no matter what. But you burned that bridge, Emily. You made sure there was no way back." Her grip on my arm tightened. "Please, Nick, give me a chance to fix this." I pulled my arm free and took a step back. "Some things can't be fixed." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, broken and alone. And for the first time in a long time, I felt nothing but peace. The days passed, and I expected that to be the last I saw of her. I had made my position clear. There was nothing left between us, nothing that could be salvaged. But Emily had never been the type to let go easily. It was a week later when I saw her again, this time outside my building. She wasn't sitting on the steps like before, looking lost and broken. No, this time she was standing, waiting, her arms crossed over her chest, as if she had finally built up the courage to say what she had been rehearsing in her head. I sighed as I approached, already tired of whatever conversation she thought we still needed to have. "What are you doing here, Emily?" I asked, not slowing down. "I told you, there's nothing left to talk about." She stepped in front of me, blocking my way to the door. "I can't accept that, Nick. I know I messed up. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I need you to hear me out." I shook my head, running a hand through my hair. "For what? Closure? I don't need it. I've already moved on." Have you? She challenged, her eyes searching mine. Because you don't look like someone who's let go. You look like someone who's still holding on to anger. I scoffed. Anger? No. If I were still angry, I wouldn't even be standing here talking to you. Anger means I care. And I don't, Emily. Not anymore. She swallowed hard, her confidence wavering. Then why can't you just listen? If you really don't care, what's 5 minutes of your time? I sighed, knowing she wasn't going to leave until I gave her what she wanted. Fine, 5 minutes. Then you leave me alone for good. She nodded quickly, as if afraid I'd change my mind. I was selfish, she started. I got caught up in something that felt exciting new. I thought I wanted more, but I didn't realize what I was losing until it was too late. You thought you were trading up, I corrected, crossing my arms. And now that it didn't work out the way you planned, you want back what you threw away. No, she shook her head, stepping closer. I want you. Not because my life fell apart, not because I regret what happened. I mean, I do regret it, but not for the reasons you think. I regret hurting you. I regret not seeing what I had when I had it. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. Regret doesn't change anything, Emily. It doesn't erase what happened. I know, she whispered, voice cracking. But tell me, Nick, is there really nothing left? Not even a part of you that wonders if we could fix this? I met her eyes, steady and unwavering. No, there's nothing left. A tear slipped down her cheek, but I felt no satisfaction in it. No triumph, just the weight of what had already been lost. Goodbye, Emily, I said softly, stepping around her and unlocking my door. She stood there as I walked inside, as I closed the door between us for the final time. I leaned against it, listening for the sound of her footsteps as she finally walked away. And when they faded into the distance, I knew, without a doubt, that I was finally free. The next morning, I woke up to an unfamiliar feeling, peace. It settled deep in my bones, quiet but firm, a stark contrast to the months of uncertainty and emotional exhaustion I had carried before. Emily was gone, truly gone, and for the first time since everything fell apart, I didn't feel the pull of the past holding me down. I went about my morning as usual, making coffee, stepping out onto the balcony to let the early sun warm my skin. The world outside moved on, indifferent to the events that had once consumed my every waking thought. It was a reminder that life continued, whether I chose to dwell on the past or not. So I chose not to. I focused on my work, my routines, the small pleasures that had become part of my everyday life. I went to the gym, pushed my limits, let the physical strain replace the emotional weight I had once carried. I spent time with friends, real friends, the kind who never judged or asked for explanations but simply existed alongside me and shared moments of laughter and normalcy. And as the days turned into weeks, I realized something. Closure wasn't about words or final conversations. It wasn't about hearing someone say they were sorry or trying to make sense of their actions. Closure was a decision, a quiet acceptance that some things weren't meant to be understood, only left behind. One evening, as I was locking up my apartment, I spotted an envelope slipped under my door. No name, no return address, just my own written in familiar handwriting. Emily. I stared at it for a long moment, debating whether to open it or throw it away unread. In the end, curiosity won. Inside a single page. No long explanations. No pleas for another chance. Just a few lines written in shaky script. I know you don't need this, but I do. I was wrong. Not just about what I did, but about everything. I spent so much time chasing something I thought was better, only to realize I had it all along. You didn't deserve what I did to you, and I will carry that guilt forever. I hope you find the happiness you deserve. I hope one day you'll remember me without anger. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and without a second thought, tossed it into the trash. Not out of spite, not out of resentment, but because I had already made my peace. I didn't need her regret to move on. I had already done that on my own. I stepped outside, breathing in the cool night air, and smiled to myself. Some stories don't need an epilogue. Some doors, once closed, should never be reopened. And some mistakes, no matter how deeply regretted, are meant to be lived with, not fixed. Emily was my past. My future was my own.